Hi, we're the Bradshaw Boys. But wanted to tell you,
we got a live show June 12th, Brooklyn, New York at the Bell House. It's going to celebrate the 20th year anniversary of the airing of the pilot of Sex and the City. We're going to have tons of surprises. We're going to read the pilot through, and then we're going to do a live podcast recording. So come on out. We'd love to see you guys there. And if you listen to the podcast, we'll be dropping little discount codes along the way if you guys keep listening, okay?
Oh, I'll drop a coupon code right now, Kevin. Use the coupon code CapoteDuncan to get $5 off your ticket. That's CapoteDuncan, Capote Duncan, our favorite character from the pilot of Sex and the City. Go to @the Boys on social to get details about the show, or you can actually go to tinyurl.com/Bradshaw Boys Live and get your tickets there. So we'll see you then. Thanks for listening. Bye.
You're now listening to The Bradshaw Boys, a podcast where three relatively grown men binge the iconic HBO series Sex and the City. So dust off those DVDs and grab yourself a white wine or even a Cosmopolitan and settle in. Take it away, boys.
Welcome to the Bradshaw Boys, a podcast where three guys watch their way through Sex and the City for the first time ever, mostly. Hi, I'm Cory Cavin.
I'm Kevin James Doyle.
I am Jon Sieber, and we're here with a very special guest today. Your name?
Eliot Glazer.
Eliot Glazer, everyone, in the studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Kicking off season 2 strong.
Season 2. It's been a while since I feel like I've heard that song, and I'm really happy to hear it again.
Absolutely.
I've learned how to play it on multiple instruments: guitar, xylophone, and piano.
Recorder? Do you play it on your recorder?
I don't have a recorder, but I'm sure I can get one from
there's an elementary
fourth grader. Yeah.
Just go check the garbage cans outside the elementary school.
We're gonna dive into some season 2 stuff, but Eliot, tell us real quick who you are and then what your experience with Sex and the City is.
I'm a writer, an actor, and comedian. Most notably, Broad City right now. And I binged Sex and the City when I was in college and just Netflixed it, like with the DVDs. And no, was that?
Oh, when Netflix was the DVD service.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
What a time.
Yeah. And that's when I binged it, thinking I wasn't necessarily into it, but I wanted to like understand it because it was such a phenomenon. And as a New Yorker, you're like, well, I guess I need to know this now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I, at the time, thought that the show ruined the city because I thought it really upended the culture of the city to make everything like girly and frou-frou and sort of make this almost New York version of like the Paris Hilton effect, like the aesthetic of the city, which was just like bizarre to me. Like it was a new, bizarre thing, although I guess it had always been around, this like, wealth porn, like wealth porn and that like lifestyle.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, getting into the show, I was like, yeah, I was, taken with it from a cultural standpoint. But the thing that I did not understand, and that to this day I still cannot understand, is how a show is such a phenomenon and has so many effects culturally when the dialogue is like like the puns. It's like nobody talks like that. Yeah. No less like people, adults in New York who are nobody talks like that. And it was like, so everybody is obsessed with this show where people are talking like it's a Neil Simon play or something, something.
Yeah.
And the puns, I'm like, that sort of has always been lost on me, that the show has such a popular, and a long-lasting cultural effect, and yet the dialogue is like so bizarrely, I don't know if juvenile is the word, but it's like that, so unrealistic. Nobody talks like that.
Do you think that almost helped it? Because I feel like that's that's so Carrie. Like saying those things where you're like, that's so ridiculous. No one would say that, but it gives this voice to the show that whenever I attribute an audience to this show, which is funny because now we're the audience because we'd never seen it, never watching our way through. Whenever I attribute an audience, I always attribute it to like white girl moving to New York who's 24 years old, and it seems like they would be super into that dialogue. That's totally stereotyping.
I did not think so. I was like, what 20-something is going to respond to this like rhythmic, like vaudevillian slapstick thing where the rhythm is so silly and but it's really the puns. I'm like, what 24-year-old is like, yes, puns. That's what I get into. In terms of humor, things that make me laugh are funny punny word like that baffles me.
Do you remember any specific puns?
No, I actually don't. But just the idea of being like, of Sarah Jessica Parker being like, and then the like the rhythm of like the and the banana of the banana. Ooh, like it was just like, what person under 70 is like connects to this?
Well, I feel like that's like
rhythm of writing.
Whenever you talk to a lawyer and you're like, oh, is it cool? They're like, it's not like TV, by the way. Right. Like it's like. Or with like the West Wing, I'm sure like the politics. It's like, no, we actually stand and talk. We never walk and talk.
Do stuff and like stand and have conversations, not this like monologue. But again, it's like, well, we are suspending disbelief. We're suspending disbelief for this fiction. But I guess to me it's like, I guess I would picture this type of language and rhythm in a, I don't know, play, like a one-act play. Yeah. And the fact that it was like a big TV and cultural institution was like, I live in New York and I'm a comedian, but I don't know anybody who's like, honey, honey, if the Bowery's, whatever, if the battery's down and the venom up, then like nobody talks like that. Nobody talks like that.
I wonder if some of that is like a 20 years ago thing, because I feel like TV audiences have gotten way smarter, especially like with peak TV. So this happening like 20, 25 years ago or something like that.
I don't think so. I mean, I really don't. Like
Golden Girls like that. I don't just bring that up because I know you're a Golden Girls fan, but I also wonder, like, Golden Girls seem like I can just see like Sophia like giving a zinger.
Well, there were zingers, but they remain funny in a sort of A to C way. Like the jokes are funny and sophisticated, and the ones on Sex and the City seemed less so to me and just more. I mean, honestly, like nope. Can you imagine watching Sex and the City and laughing out loud at a Samantha line versus just being like, or like when she makes one of these puns, you're like, okay,
A lot of I do think a lot of the ones have been like, even a season in, we're sort of know already, like, okay, there's gonna be like the, like you guys hated the whole dick thing from it was season finale of last one where she's just sad the guy has the small dick,
right?
And there was like we talked a lot. It was like kind of right on the money. Like Samantha's sad because and there was like some puns there. There was like
private dick or
that's like. It's like, it's a small thing, but it's a big problem.
I wanted a king size, and I got a Tootsie Roll.
Nobody talks like that.
Along my conscience.
Nobody speaks like that, especially in like passionate moments where you're talking about like sex and stuff. Nobody is like, honey, you got the Tootsie Roll, and I got. Nobody talks like that. The real bummer is that as a gay guy, I've seen a lot of gay guys adopt that voice.
Yeah.
And it bums me out because it's like, it's not as funny as you think it is. It's just not as funny as you think it is to be like, honey, oh God, it's like a Catskills comedian,
Yeah.
It's a bummer.
It is funny to think of it that way because it's completely unmasked when you think of these like four glamorous women. But if you put them in that, I just have this image of Samantha in the Catskills with a mic.
Exactly. Like, it works.
Yeah, completely.
If you think, it's like,
I've never had anything this close to my mouth. Guess what I have?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like,
who's here tonight
crazy.
From the city?
Can you imagine? Like, and it makes sense if you strip away the masks and the clothing. It's like. I was gonna say Rod Stewart, Rodney Dangerfield.
Yeah.
But it's weird. It's weird.
It's true though.
You could take my apartment. No, please take my apartment.
Please take it. Please take it. I got into a co-op. Yeah, I could actually see Rodney Dangerfield being a character on Sex and the City. Some like guy they meet in a diner.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
I have a question because you were saying like the wealth porn thing.
Yeah.
And you write on Broad City, and I feel like Broad City is a big. is it any sort of a reaction to Sex and the City of like, this is actually what it's like to live here? Which I feel like watching Broad City, it's so much more relatable and more like, that's actually what it's like.
Yeah, I think it's, without it being a conscious choice, it's very much an answer to the show where you don't sit there and write with the idea, oh, we have to make this the upside down version of Sex and the City or Friends or something, or any other show with like wealthy people in New York. But yeah, I think just by nature, it's like what we're writing, which is like exaggerated versions of our real lives, and you're not around people who talk like this.
Yeah,
they don't exist, and so yeah, I think it's definitely a reaction to that. Also because there is a specific vibe to like being kind of young and broke or relatively broke in the city, and the hustle that it takes, and there is a definite, and again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there's a huge element of fantasy to the idea that like Carrie Bradshaw is a newspaper columnist who has this humongous apartment and all these clothes. It's like, sure, you can, I think, if you look hard enough or you fall into the right circles, you can have an exciting life in New York that is filled with constantly changing elements. You know, I do think that requires that's more personality than money, so to speak. But yeah, it's definitely it's easy. It's exciting to write the way things are versus knowing that like that's not real. Like Carrie could not afford that apartment. Right. She just couldn't. If you're writing a newspaper column, you're not. You have roommates, you know, or you live like in like Bay Ridge or something. You're not. It's a fantasy that like is like frozen in time.
Yeah. I think it created a whole generation of people that are like, so many people that we talk about with the show now are just like, and there's no way she could do that.
No way.
And I bet when it was on, the people maybe that watched it are then like intrigued and everything, are like,
sure,
oh my gosh, is that what it's like? Yep. And then it created a whole bunch of people that are like, yep,
nope,
don't have 7 jobs,
not in the faintest.
It's the same thing with the Friends apartment.
Oh yeah,
you look
of course.
that, and we talked about this. Where there's always the thing where they're like, well, so and so had a grandfather who had this, rent controlled apartment, and that's why they have this warehouse that they live in. Basically,
but at least that lines up where it's like, well, the reason we have this is because of a grandparent. Whereas on Sex and the City, it's just sort of a given that she has an enormous apartment, so many so much clothes and stuff. And the show then, I think I've only seen the first movie. I know there's two. And the movie itself really, spun off into like the dirtiest of the wealthy porn. And it's just so fantastical. It's so fantastical, and to watch I saw online something like a video called like why Miranda is the character we love now from Sex, like a current video explaining why like Miranda is the character that is like the best, especially in like current times with the current climate. And it is funny to watch like the pilot. They do that thing where they were talking to camera and breaking the fourth wall.
Right. Yeah.
And Cynthia Nixon literally looks like she took the ferry from Staten Island. She's wearing like that ugly like polyester blazer and knee-length skirt and like pumps. Like she looks like 80s working girl New York, and talking to camera, and if I remember correctly, like eating from like the like bodega.
We talked about that.
And it's like, oh, that's real. That's the real
so
thing.
Funny,
that's
it's not
real
like
New York.
That's the real New York. And so she, I think, has resonated in that way without it probably wasn't even a conscious choice, but she resonates because it's like, that's like reality. Yes, she's like a lawyer, which means she makes a lot of money, but it doesn't necessarily go that far in New York, which is why she's eating at a bodega buffet. I love that.
Yeah.
And I think the show, and I think the show, for better or worse, spun off into a fantasy land that served it well. But if there was an attempt to try and like replicate real New York, I think it was, kind of askew.
D-.
Not even that fake, just like that, just unrealistic.
Yeah.
With what they were making.
That'll be interesting to watch this episode and pull out some particular things that really stick out. Do we have the name of the episode here?
We do. The episode is called "Take Me Out to the Ballgame."
Ooh,
Episode 201. Take Me Out to the Ballgame.
Any ideas? What take me out? Are they going to go to a physical baseball game, or is it going to be like?
I can already gamble. If I was a gambling man, they'd go to a Yankees game, not a Mets game.
Okay.
I'd agree.
Does one of them hook up with a Yankee player? That's what I want to know.
No.
I think she hooks up with Joe Torre. I think that's who she hooks up with.
Oh my god.
Steinbrenner.
Yeah, Steinbrenner.
I met Joe Torre one time. I was working the door at some like kids event or something, and his parent came. He was a parent. His like child was on a tour or something, and I looked at his card and I was like, "No, you're not on the list." And he's like, and the guy's like, "Do you know who he is?" And I was like, "I don't. I'm just kidding. I know you're the coach of the Yankees." And he was like, no one around appreciated it. And I definitely shouldn't have done it. He was mad. The guy that I was working for was mad.
But you had to find a new job.
Yeah, well, happy to.
It was worth it though for this moment right now.
Joe, if you're out there,
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
let's go watch it.
Let's dive into season 2.
We'll talk
All
about
right.
it.
We'll be back.
Bye.
Episode 13. Take Me Out to the Ballgame. Carrie meets the new Yankee at a baseball game, all the while preparing for her first post-breakup encounter with Big. Miranda gets fed up with the girls always talking about men, and Samantha gets frustrated with her boyfriend's deficiencies. Charlotte dates a guy who has a tendency to adjust his package a lot. And now, back to the boys.
And we're back.
Woo, first
Take me
episode.
out to the ball game.
Man, a lot of turtlenecks that episode, guys.
Yeah.
I will say,
Miranda was consistently rocking a turtleneck, which I can appreciate.
Except when she was rocking like overalls and a giant puffy coat and a blue hat.
She's
and probably
dressed
had-
like Punky Brewster.
Yes. She probably had a slingshot and a frog in her back pocket.
right.
She looked like a boy from the Sandlot.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
It's like it's walking around. It's like
for you to be like, yeah, there's a lot of puns in Sex and the City,
Good
and then to watch every baseball pun.
Completely
Of-
changed how I watched that episode.
I will never watch that show the same again.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I mean, that one I feel like was probably loaded with even more, but maybe not.
I think it's pretty standard.
Yeah.
Across
Like,
the
he's
board,
wearing a
every
cup.
episode.
Honey, his cup runneth over.
Oh my gosh.
Nobody
that
talk.
one.
No, again, I'll just say it until I'm blue in the face, but nobody talks like that.
It's so
Nobody.
And the second they were at the baseball game and then had a hot dog, I was like, I'm waiting
yeah.
for the Samantha hot dog thing. And of course she brings it up.
3,
She's like, try having
2.
sex with bye.
Yep.
But
Even
is
when-
it kosher?
Is it kosher?
Which, if she's not even Jewish or anything, it's like,
All right, let's. We'll do a
John-
quick recap of the episode. So basically, that episode was about breaking up and going through the various rules of breaking up. The end of season 1, Carrie breaks up with Mr. Big, and we get right into it. It's season 2 process. I think it's 4 weeks after the breakup. She thinks she's seeing Mr. Big everywhere, but they're just random people on the street, kind of dressed like him. The gang decides to get together and go to a baseball game. And throughout that course of going to the baseball game, her friends are given their various insights as to how you handle breakups, their own breakup rules. Miranda is very much get over it. Charlotte is kind of wallow in the misery for as long as possible because time is the only thing. They get to the baseball game. Carrie gets drunk, catches a fly ball, and has it signed by the new Yankee, who she asks to the Dolce & Gabbana party.
Before knowing his name, apparently.
Before knowing his
Yeah,
name.
knowing
She
his
learns that after the party.
Right.
They go to the party. They hit it off. She gets her picture in the paper. At this point, Miranda gets a little frustrated that all they're talking about is boys, or men, rather. She feels like they're, junior hires. She then runs into her boyfriend, Eric Assel, I believe his name was, on the street. She runs away, and Carrie sees Big at a very divey bar for being with a Yankee
It
player.
looked like
Right.
it was I forget the name of the
PJ
bar.
Clark's?
It looked like
PJ Clark's, yeah.
Yeah.
She,
It wasn't, but that's what I thought too.
Yeah.
She emotionally couldn't handle seeing Big and hops on a payphone and calls someone who, it's a little bit weird between the two of us, but we need to meet. You think it might be Big. runs into Miranda, and that's kind of a wrap on the episode. So
yeah, the big reveal is like, she's like, meet at our place, and they go to that diner or whatever, and it's like, surprise, Miranda in another bizarre turtleneck that clashes very strongly with her hair color.
Her shock of red hair.
Another bizarre.
Yeah.
There was like a vibe with the episode that was like, their back, like it looked a little sharper. Their outfits were a little more defined.
A little more money.
Like I think it was probably a big deal at the time. There's like Miranda's got a new haircut and it's bright.
Yeah, what a bold cut on that head.
Someone said it was very David Bowie-ish.
Yeah.
It is very Bowie.
Yeah.
My like underlying suspicion all along has been that Miranda's gay. She just comes off as very butch to me in a lot of her clothing, voice, attitude. And I can see how she's not, but there's always just like this. There's always just like, come on, like those like overalls. I'm like, come on, you're not, unless you're painting a fence or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm supposed to take away from this.
It is funny is seeing like the beginning of the episode, Carrie is like in her dress down clothes and she's afraid she's going to see Big, and her dress down clothes are like no makeup.
Yeah.
And her hair's like sort of messed up, and she has on a long coat and jeans and a t-shirt. Like she looks like a Madewell ad where it's like, take a Saturday off, girl. But like that's her dress down. Miranda's dress down is like she's undercover for Law and Order.
Yes.
Like looking like she's going back to the surveillance van.
Oh my God,
she looks
I love
so
it.
different. Yeah.
She's the only one. I mean, truly, Miranda's the only one on the show who, maybe it's a testament to Cynthia Nixon's acting, but she's the only one on the show who I believe.
I mean,
like honestly,
that one moment where she sees she sees Eric asshole, it gets this like serious tone, and it's a shot on her face, and she looks terrified. It felt like a different show, and it's interesting when we were talking about how people are looking back at like saying like maybe Miranda's the only one that kind of ages well, like her character. If you watch the show from Miranda's point of view, her acting is super believable, and it's like a different show.
Yeah, when she's like, guys, can we talk about something besides dicks and like boys?
Yes.
And it's like, wait, this is like
it's like a real
really
moment.
breaks through the sort of mirage of the show where it's like, oh, this is a real person talking about something real, not just being like, just being kind of vapid and just throwing puns, or like, it's like everything else like puns and like it just like gabbing, and she's like a person.
It might help her to offer up more interesting topics of conversation than copious amounts of baseball stats and Palm Pilot stuff.
Right.
The Palm Pilot thing had to have been a sponsored integration. It seemed, God. I don't know if they did that with TV shows then, but they did. It never came back.
Sopranos was the same time as that, and there was every once in a while I was like, I'll just have a Coca-Cola Classic, please. And it's
God.
like,
the Palm Pilot thing though doesn't
came out of nowhere.
She doesn't show it to us, then there's sort of like a negative connotation to the idea that like if the girls don't want to see it, then
that's true. It seemed like they would all have been like, I do need something to keep all my dates together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or Miranda, I'm like, Palm Pilot, I could see her just being like, guys, you have to see my tape recorder. Like I could see her being like, guys, I have a Walkman now.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh man, Miranda's like up on it.
She's an early adopter.
She's an early adopter.
Completely.
There is, so then Miranda does have this rant that was one of the, we were talking about how she ages better, and I've read a bunch of that internet stuff saying that before we watched it. But this was like the most explicit version of that. That was basically like almost a critique of the show, like you were saying. But then at the end, she experiences the very thing that she's talking about. Do you guys feel like that took by being like, ooh, I saw breakups are hard, I'm going to go gab with Carrie at the diner about that. Do you feel like that took away from her rant, or they can both be simultaneously true? Does that make sense?
Miranda's rant?
Yeah, of being like you, but then being like, I understand because I saw Eric asshole.
Right.
I think that's Dutch. Is that
think
Dutch
it's
or French?
Azul. I think I think it adds to it because one thing. I mean, I do have a kind of a different opinion of the series now that Eliot talked about all the fun stuff. Like there is a thing where I'm like, oh man, this does make it a little harder to watch.
I hope you enjoyed season 1 when we liked the show, but guess what? Fuck it.
Yeah. No, but one thing I
honey.
That was great. One thing I do think that happens in the show that I think they do well is they do a good arc of each episode where you see characters grapple with different things, and the fact that like Miranda was super confident, and then she has that moment of vulnerability, which was very punctuated by Cynthia Nixon's acting, and then at the end, like the strong one and the romantic end up at a diner eating cold fries together.
Yeah.
Like it's a nice bow on a story that's tied,
totally.
you know. So I don't know. I feel like it makes for like a rounder episode in that way,
and it makes Miranda like
More
just
human.
a better character. Yeah,
I think she's both. I think she lands both, where she's like, I don't want to just talk about like men all the time, but like, yeah, that's a part of our lives, and we can talk about it. But still, it's like Palm Pilots and baseball, guys. Palm Pilots and baseball.
I mean, they got her to say it like 3 times. She
really
was like,
did.
"I'm a really big Yankees fan."
I'm a
kept
big
saying
Yankees fan.
Also, question about the Yankees game. They go to this Yankees game. They don't have great seats, and like Carrie makes a thing about the Giuliani smoking ban. She says something about that, which seems like very at the time. But then, how did they get down into the tunnel where the players are? Did they ever
great
explain that?
question.
No.
They just end up outside the locker room, and then there's like a 30-second thing where Samantha just peeks into the locker room while they're taking showers.
Because she's dating a guy with a small dick, so she's like gazing into the locker room at like particularly men of color just to see their big dongs.
I did think that
security was terrible at Yankee Stadium.
Terrible.
It was terrible, but I was like, just they sort of zoom in on the black player, and it's like, and I don't know, maybe that's something I don't know. I wondered if she was gonna. I was hoping she wasn't gonna comment and been like, "Now that's what I want" or something. So
now that's a foot long I want to take.
yeah,
Who cares if it's kosher?
I'm ready to slide into his first base, honey.
they did make a slide joke. They did every.
There's the whole thing where Samantha has sex with her boyfriend, and then she
Very
coaches him
gratuitous.
through
She
it.
coaches them. Yeah.
So many sex
and
baseball puns.
what was so I know we talked about when we watched the episode, but it was something to do with the Mudville. What was that a reference
that's
to?
Casey. That's Casey at the bat. It's like an old poem that's like the mighty Casey struck out. We could read it, but it's like it's
a baseball poem.
It's a classic like baseball poem that like you read to like kids in second grade, and it's about how Casey is about to strike out, but then he ends up saving the game. But it's
Something about joy in Mudville. I wrote
There's
down.
no joy in Mudville.
My question is, I'm like a pretty above average, an average sports fan, and I had no idea what they were referencing. Like, how did they expect their target audience?
My thing with the show is like I'm looking at it now, and it was like this episode is from 1999.
Right.
So I was in high school and already had a pretty good sense of humor. I mean, I was a kid, but like I knew what was funny to me and what was like, you know, whatever, like Waiting for Guffman, and just like I had like already a, as you guys probably did too, like a sharpened sense of humor, you know? And so I look at this and I'm like, would I at that time, even though I was younger, would I still have looked at it and been like, rolled my eyes when she says something like, she had him by the ball, or I said it before, but his cup runneth over.
Yeah.
Would I then, and would most people then have been like, hilarious, like laugh? Would they think it's actually funny, or would they also be like, oh, okay?
I think I would have thought, because as a teenager who was like had a sense of humor, but it was also looking to professional things, I would have been like, oh, is that how you do it? Like, I don't think I would have been like, that's a bad joke. I would have been like, that's the kind of jokes they make on TV.
Yes.
But it also, when you were saying that, this made me think, I guess it was this show a comedy? I would have just thought of it as an adult show when I was a kid, but it was a comedy.
Yeah, I think it was a comedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, are we discrediting the fact that it was
20
revolutionary and it was 20 years ago, and there wasn't, although looking back at now it's punny and
no,
gratuitous,
because that must just be the style, because like on HBO at the time in the early 90s was what's the Larry Sanders, was it the Larry
called
Sanders
the Larry
show?
Sanders Show.
And the writing on that's 10 years before this, and the writing on that is natural and funny and everything, and you could watch it now and it's
great.
Still
It
holds up in a completely different comedic way,
And as does the Golden Girls, quite honestly.
yeah.
And again, that is literally why I'm like, were people on board with the puns in 1999?
You know what show I would like to go back and watch some of is, do you remember the show Dream On?
Yeah, I never watched it though.
I remember my friends and I like had heard about it because it was supposed to be the like sexy comedy.
Right.
And we were like, oh, we could see boobs.
Yeah, boobs.
But it's the woman that created Friends, I think. It was one of her first shows, and it was a couple years before Sex and the City. And I would be interested to see how those jokes played and if they matched up to like Friends type humor. 'Cause Larry Sanders, Sex and the City and that show probably had 3 different styles of humor.
Yeah, and Friends still. I mean, Friends was a specific type of humor, very
Totally.
sarcastic, but a lot of it still holds up. I think in the reruns that I've seen.
Yeah.
Chandler Bong.
Honey, his Chandler, like cross reference.
I'd love for him to bing me.
Bing my
Bing
Chandler.
my bong.
To me, I'm like, when I watch this, I'm like, like it still seems like the jokes just. It was a very specific choice for there to be so many puns, and
That's true.
I'm just very curious as if to whether, like, it seems like that didn't hamper anybody that I went to college with at NYU. It didn't hamper their attempt to like become Carrie Bradshaw.
I think,
which is weird.
Until you pointed that out, I didn't notice it as much.
Yeah.
And now it's like all I noticed.
It's everybody just wanted to become her as soon as like when I got to NYU, I was like, I really was in my head, quite honestly, just like so excited because I thought I was going to like, you guys ever watch A Different World?
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going
show.
to a historically black college, like an HBC, and it's going to be super diverse, and I'm going to have, friends of all different, and it was all like girls and gay guys who wanted to become Carrie Bradshaw.
Which would be totally different if you would have gone to Howard University.
That's right.
Where a different world was set.
Different world,
it was
exactly.
Like, this is a black college.
Right. I mean, then I would have been the weirdo, but like ultimately I was unpleasantly surprised with the fact that like just because I was at a school that was in downtown Manhattan, it wasn't like, the Spelman College or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that one thing that's interesting about Sex and the City is that what carried on, pun right there, is that it's the style and like the like mythos of the show versus the writing in terms of the joke writing.
Yeah.
Like Larry Sanders,
that's weird.
There's the mythos of that, but you're also like, you go back and you're like, oh, this was a Judd Apatow show 20 years ago.
But isn't that weird?
But I think it's the
maybe.
This may be too deep, but it's like back in the day, like Shakespeare wrote plays about kings, so that you could watch it and be like, that's what the kings' lives are like. And I feel like this is similar in that it's like, what's the dream? Like watching the Kardashians, it's like,
honey, this is what the queen's lives are like. Honey, we're totally co-opting your honey joke.
As to what you're saying, Kevin.
Well, I'm saying that it's like that dream mythos of being like, what would it be like? Our version of a royal life now would be like money, fashion, Manhattan, the city, sex, freedom.
Yes, totally.
And so I think that is the mythos of the show, and maybe the writing didn't have to be as good.
You're right.
It captures everyone's imagination.
You're right. And I wrote on the show Younger. That's very similar to it. Takes place in the same city, has the same look, and was created by Darren Star, who also created Sex and the City. And it was an interesting experience to write on the first and second seasons of a show that some were saying was like the second coming of Sex and the City, but it was different because it took place in Brooklyn. It was more so in Brooklyn, and obviously the internet is much more pervasive, and so it was just an interesting place to write because we had to keep it modern, but Darren is such a titan of his industry that like basically anything he touches turns to gold, and so you obviously follow his lead. But it was just it was just funny, and it's interesting to watch Sex and the City now because I think the sort of like on Younger, the dialogue can feel Sex and the City-esque in certain ways, a little punny or a little what's the word? Like not just kind of I'm stumbling here.
Well, no, I was going to say
quippy
or
yes,
like
quippy.
Quippy.
And I felt as sort of a more straight man comedian, not straight man, but like
straight ahead,
a by the books comedian.
Yeah.
That was not the dialogue that I excelled at because I just didn't feel like that's how people talk.
Yeah. And
so it was an interesting role to play of being like the sole comedian in the room, or the sole like performing comedian.
Right.
It was just fascinating.
Well, that's interesting because I haven't seen a much of Younger. Like I've seen a little bit of it. I actually had an audition for Younger and had a callback with Darren Star one time.
Oh,
and that was an interesting thing because in the callback I was like, this is Darren Star, the creator of Sex and the City, and it was just like me and him and a person in the room.
Yeah,
but it was interesting because I watched a little bit of it going into that.
Yeah,
and that show, other than this show, you said a lot of it takes place in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
It seems like it's not Carrie Bradshaw, but it's like an older woman who she's in the Carrie Bradshaw world, but she has to reverse herself to come to like current New York City.
Exactly.
She's got to pretend she's younger. She's got to hang out with young, cool Brooklyn kids.
Yes.
And so you're taking what was this Sex and the City life, and it's like, no, that's not as important now. The younger indie thing, which is like poorer and not as like wealth porn.
I mean, you look at Sex and the City, and you're right. It's like it is wealth porn, and the idea there, at least from my point of view, was always like, well, they're in their mid to late 30s, and that's why they have like, and I know I'm generalizing here, and it doesn't even make sense, but I'm like, that's why they care about marriage and relationships, and why Miranda wears like pantsuits, and why they're just like, they can get away with this like adult stuff because they're quote unquote old. And now I'm like close to their age, and I'm like, nope, it's not that they're old, it's that they're like, it's that the age of the characters has not aged well. Being whatever they're supposed to be, 40, 42, 38, 42 has not aged well, and thus Younger is so specifically about a 41-year-old woman trying to fit in with kids in their mid-20s.
I think also that has changed now because I think about the fact that like a 35-year-old person, like even if you look at people that were 35 in movies in the 80s, a 35-year-old person in an 80s movie looks like they're 50. 60s. Yeah,
it's
and
crazy.
A 35-year-old person now, it's like, oh, I thought that guy was
in his
22.
Late 20s. Yes, it's
everyone
really
dresses
bizarre.
differently, and like people do things later or at different times in their life.
It's so bizarre, and Younger is such a funny and interesting show to write on for all the reasons we were already talking about. But secondarily, that because it's about a 40-year-old woman trying to fit in with 20-somethings, the writer's room itself was filled with a few of us who were in our late 20s, early 30s, and then the older writers who were in their like 50s or so. It created such an interesting dynamic because they're coming from a sort of, even though Sex and the City isn't that old, but it's an older aesthetic versus like, what do the millennials think? And how do we see humor, and what is our humor, and what feels real and what feels not real? And also, the higher ups at Younger are also wealthy and wealthier and have been wealthy for a long enough time, and we in our late 20s and early 30s are not, and have not been. And it's so different because Sex and the City is all about like, there is no question of like access. They go where they want.
Well, Carrie said she maxed out her credit
and
card
then still
to buy
went shopping.
And still went shopping.
Right.
And she bought that dress to impress the Yankee. And,
Right.
But at the same time, they were in the highest like nosebleed section at Yankee Stadium, which is like, what's that supposed to mean? Because if more,
why weren't you on base?
Why don't you have box seats or something? Especially if Miranda's a lawyer. But it's like but then their whole thing is like that to me. Watching that scene where like Carrie's smoking and drinking and has her legs kicked up, her feet kicked up on the seats in front of her. That to me is the version of being like, well, yes, they're like metropolitan, but they're also like hip, baby, and they're up at the top smoking and drinking, baby,
without it necessarily be grounded in what they would actually be doing as characters.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a. I think that's what the show sort of has confused me because I feel like I get mixed signals from it.
So. My question would be, when you're writing on Younger, is there a like, not a purposeful mission, but a mission you have in your head to be like, okay, like how can I pull it back as much from being Pun City to have more realistic dialogue? Is that something that comes out of you naturally, or a conversation you bring up?
It's a unspoken conversation.
Okay.
And I'm clearly on one side of that conversation where I'm like, no puns.
Yeah.
But you know, it's not my, authority to decide how many puns, how punny a script is, unless it's my very own. And in my very own, I'm like, I like, probably like you guys, like the weirder left of center, alt-esque type of jokes that are a little like nuttier.
Yeah.
And so it was just a sort of, an interesting practice to try to, in my first writing job, to like skew it towards the more straight and narrow voice of the show.
Yeah.
Without being like a weirdo about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask, is Younger still on?
Yeah. It does really well.
Season 5?
It'll be 5. I think it'll be 5.
Wow.
It's done really well, and you know, and as it should. I mean, it's very like Sex and the City. It's a half-hour show. It's beautiful to look at.
Got a good cast.
Great cast. Great costumes. The same costume designer as Sex and the City. So it's those Pat Field. So it's the same, you know, eccentric and interesting and fun, colorful. Purple turtlenecks. No, I'm just kidding. There's other things, but
Blue overalls,
blue overalls, and purple turtlenecks.
Yeah.
But it's got the same vibe, and people respond to it in the same way. In that it's like candy. Like Sex and the City and Younger are like candy. They're like delicious, fun shows that you get, you know, engrossed in for half an hour, but it's not going to overtake your life.
Yeah.
And I think that's to Darren's credit. He knows how to make a TV show just like almost like bite-sized and like, you know, just the appropriate like size and length. Oh my God, I sound like I'm rolling into a Samantha pun. I'm like, size and length, honey.
Honey,
sweetheart.
I want to talk about
that. Sounds like
Darren
to me.
Yeah.
I want to talk about something in that episode, particularly that would never, you know, that episode was Carrie kind of started it by saying that New York or whatever city you're living in is a deserted battlefield loaded with emotional landmines.
When you're in a breakup.
When you're in a breakup.
Yes.
Right.
Which I was thinking about that concept, and I imagine that any city that you live in, you're going to see things that remind you of your partner and are going to bring back memories. But I don't think that episode could air nowadays, specifically because of social media, Instagram, Facebook. You're not going to be walking through a city and you're going to be seeing Mr. Big or think you're going to be seeing him.
I don't think
nowadays,
any of these episodes could air now with that. It's
Right.
like
Yeah, there would have had to be a scene where she's like scrolling through her feed.
Well, it's
and, like,
nowadays
blocking him or unfriending
you're on
him.
Facebook and you can actually see where
in
Mr.
real
is.
time.
But you're also not worried. You know, she was constantly worried about running into him and not going to this party because he might be there and trying to look. But nowadays,
I
you're
do
like,
think that's not false, but and obviously the writing comes from personal stories in the writer's room. But I feel like when you watch that, it's like clearly that's like. I think it's stretched out for TV, and it's like the fantasy is sort of like, you know, elongated in that way, because I don't really buy that concept. The idea that it's like I walk around this, you know, like I walk around and waiting for my heart to be broken. It's like I don't. To me, to that point, what you were saying, Cory, about how people wanted to like come to New York in their early 20s and become Carrie. I think that that like element, that like that feeling of the show, that narrative point, bled into real life, and that people were like, I'm like Carrie, and now I'm going to walk around the city. It's going to be a landmine and emotions every, you know, I feel like it was like a false reality that became a reality because people were like, I want to take this show so literally.
I do think people the same way, this is a weird example, but like I went to a college with a really great basketball team. I went to the University of North Carolina, and I would meet people. I love basketball, but I'd meet people who are like, I came to UNC because I'm a huge Tar Heel fan. And I'm here to watch basketball. And it's like, I think there are people that move to New York because they're like, I love Sex and the City.
Yes.
And I want to live that
absolutely.
experience for 4 to 5 years. And then like, we'll see what comes out of it. And then you realize at some point,
and then
you're
they
like,
get bed bugs. And
then they
like,
get bed
oh,
bugs
shit.
and they live
Like,
in
this
New
is
York
awful.
City. And they're like, this is not what I experienced or what I wanted.
I dated I dated a guy for like 3 years, and he and all his friends were from Texas, or as they say, Texas, which I love. Love it. I love the Z. I love it so much. But they all were here, and all lived in Manhattan, and or like Williamsburg, but like mostly Manhattan. And after our breakup, my ex-boyfriend and most of his friends have since left. And I think it really was that that choice to be like, I'm going to Manhattan, I'm going to be fabulous like Carrie or whatever, or fabulous in whatever way I think I can be, and I'm going to do that for 5-6 years, and it's a novelty and it's a part of my life, and then I'm leaving and going back home or going to a smaller city. And for me, to me that is a very distinct replica of Sex in the City personified.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I think about people coming to New York like that is that I've realized, I mean, all four of us in this room have been in New York for a while at some point.
Yeah.
And I think at some point you realize when people are here and they're like, hey, what's up, man? Hey, what are you doing? At some point you kind of just got to grind it out for a year or two.
Yeah.
And then it's like either it's a hard place to live.
Yes.
And some people can come here for that fantasy, which is totally fine. But then there's a reality that you hit.
Well, yeah.
And it's like, are you going to stay past that or not?
And you and I both are, as comedians, it's also a different sort of, groundwork, like, we met a while ago as comedians. It's like, you're not cavorting around the city with other comedians being like, where are we brunching, honey? It just doesn't, that's like not the landscape.
Yeah.
And so with my ex and his friends, it was so interesting to watch them actually try to imbibe or whatever, like really live out that lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll also add that as somebody from New York, and well, specifically Long Island, but still like from here, from the burbs, whatever, to me, New York is like, to me, in my own experience, it feels very like Jewy and like food driven and like, at least in Long Island, it's like bagel stores, gas stations, coffee shops, and everything's run on blood money. And that's like the way that it is. Everything's mafia. And so there, my ex and his friends sort of kaleidoscope version of New York was this like Carrie Bradshaw's island. And for me, it was like, but aren't we just talking about like bagel stores run by the mob?
Yeah. When are they going to go to Russ and Daughters?
Exactly. But not even that. It's like,
you mean just like corner bagel stores, like Bagel Delight or something.
Yeah,
like that.
And to that point, what you're watching on Sex and the City is, if what I'm saying is, if my ex and his friends all were trying to live the Carrie Bradshaw lifestyle, it makes sense to me that they also were the people who they weren't rich, but they made sure to sort of check off the list of like taking cabs everywhere and spending stupid money on clothes and like spending dumb money on like weekend trips that we really couldn't afford, but like, and so it was this bizarre, like, the schism for me, because I was like, I want to be with my boyfriend and his friends, but I'm also like, yeah, New York's a bagel. Like, this is one big bagel.
This was a good acknowledgement for the first time.
And Carrie never goes on the subway.
I was about to say that. I thought about that a week ago. I was like, we've never seen any of them on the subway. And
I
I'm
don't
like,
think
I know.
you do.
At least one of them has to take the subway to work.
Well, that's
someone has
when I
to.
see,
it's probably Miranda.
Of course.
I
takes
see
the Staten Island ferry and then the
She
subway.
takes the Staten Island ferry to the overall store.
When I see someone mega famous on the subway, I'm always like, that's crazy. If I had that much money. Like, I see Amy Schumer on the subway, not as much, a few years ago.
She's always doing sets. She's always working out material on the subway.
No, but you're
What
like...
time is it?
She does show time.
Schumer time.
But when I've seen her, like William H. Macy, and you're sort of like... I mean, William H. Macy is one of the more successful actors in the world.
Yeah, but
And-
no one in New York bothers you, really. I mean, you really don't get bothered. I mean...
But my point is like, those people ride, like, it's not like William H. Macy and Amy Schumer have a driver.
Yeah, and if you see William H. Macy on the subway, then why don't you ever see Carrie on the subway?
Yes, exactly.
And then that does carry over to real life, where it's like, my ex and his friends were like, nah, we'll only take cabs. We don't take the train. I'm like, but you're not rich.
Yeah,
that's why this
what?
made sense when she's like, I have credit cards maxed out. It's like, I knew something was up with this first season.
That was the first time that they've been like, I'm struggling money wise. But I think that part of it was also to say like, that's what happens in a breakup. You put yourself to the edges of everything you can take because you got to drive the pain away.
Yeah, there's an episode that comes later. I think it's a few seasons out, but it's like a whole episode that is based on her like needing to buy shoes and not being able to afford them. And it's really fascinating, especially now, because you're just like, and of course they couldn't have predicted this at the time, but we're now living in an era of like political correctness that's so strict that it's like everybody is just waiting to be like, how dare you?
Right.
And it is so fascinating to watch a show that at every turn you're like, ew, how, like, honestly, like, how dare you, Carrie? Like, how dare you complain about when they're in the baseball stands and Kim Cattrall says about the fact that she's dating a guy with a small dick, I hate my life. I'm like, ew, like you shouldn't be allowed to say I hate my life
Right.
when you're like rich and white and like lucky.
Yeah.
I don't, again, it's like I'm taking offense with a line in a show from 20 years ago,
Right.
but it's just like, ew, it just grosses me out.
Yeah.
And it also grosses me out that they never take the subway. It grosses me out that you never see a person of color.
Except when you're looking in the Yankees locker room.
Exactly.
And he's showering, he's got a giant schlong.
That's right.
Don't worry, I heard Jennifer Hudson's in the second movie.
That's right.
So you
they add her into the movie.
It's so weird. That will always be the strange thing to me, that the show is so Caucasian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
For the whole show, I think.
I was going to say because the theme of this was breakups.
Right.
Your breakup with was it fraught at all with any like, oh, I can't go to the same place, or I'm worried about the subway stop or anything? Or
Yeah, I mean, I guess because it's
3 years did it take you a year and a half to get over?
God, Charlotte knew.
Charlotte knew she was right. The math works out.
Or
I don't know.
Was it one of the guys in the stadiums that gave you advice? Remember,
Yeah.
we had the 4 talking head.
Oh,
No,
yeah,
it was
we
the,
saw that trope return of
yeah.
them talking
Right.
straight to camera.
It was the
No,
don't,
it was
don't cry.
It was the
guys.
obese lady selling peanuts who's like, he's a bum.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're like, and it's like, what?
Change
Move
your
somewhere
address,
else.
change your name, change
your
everything.
name. He's
And the
a
guy's like,
bum.
don't cry, because if you get back together, then you're the guy that cried.
Which
And I would be
his-
like, hey,
his
guys
bros-
can cry, dude.
His bros were really on board
Really
with that.
on
They were
board.
throwing some rocks.
Those
for that
guys
one.
look like they were roadies for Korn.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they really do.
They were just like long hair,
But
like
that's like, I
metal
think
guys.
that's what was like okay then, like for like dudes.
They were looking like freaks on a leash.
Yes.
They were freaks on a leash.
No, I had to. We had to like divvy up the gym.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And but I mean, in a weird way, like what's lucky for me is that when we moved in together, it was in Chelsea, and I hadn't lived in Manhattan since I was in college, because who could afford or think to? It just wasn't possible.
Well, if you're divvying things up, at least you could take the subway. No.
That's what I'm saying. It was like truly, it was like
you keep taking those cabs. I'm
not kidding. Like my ex got hired at Google, which was half a block from where we lived in Chelsea.
Oh,
So he
wow.
really did not
He
have to
never
take
took
the
the subway.
train.
Wow.
And so for me, it was like as soon as that relationship ended, I didn't have to reclaim our spaces, because he and his friends chose a very
Different life.
yeah. And I'm not some sort of like fucking pauper or like like poor or broke or crying like poverty or anything. I just was used to having the like friends in like Brooklyn and Queens and kind of scrappier and not looking to do like the wealthiest, not trying to like pass off this like Carrie Bradshaw lifestyle.
There's a restaurant that closed that was in Meatpacking District that I know is on the show, and it was yellow on the outside. I wish I knew the name, but I remember whenever I would walk past it on a Saturday or Sunday, it was brunch city, and it was just like all of the people you're saying.
Yeah.
It was like very much like one of the things we have to do is go to this place and do brunch, and we'll dress up, and it'll be just like our little Sex and the City experience. I'll find out the name. But I remember that being the epitome when I was giving Sex and the City tours, because that's why I knew what that place was.
That's what everyone wants to do, I think. That's coming out of that show.
Oh, yeah. But that was definitely like, whether they lived here or were visiting,
Right.
there are people that's their weekend.
It all kind of, to me, like, I think it sort of like jumped the shark or became this like cultural moment when Miranda, I think, and Carrie, and I guess, I forget, this comes later, but it's like they go to Magnolia.
Yeah.
And they're like eating a cupcake on the bench outside, and it's like mopey. They're like, I think they're like moping or something, or sad or whatever. Or even if they're not, it's like, okay, this is when the show became that like cultural machine, where it was like the show created Magnolia Bakery, and Magnolia Bakery was then headlines around the block for, let's be
Still
real,
does.
subpar cupcakes. They're subpar.
Yeah.
The
We talked
frosting
about-
is good. The cake itself is not.
The frosting is good. I agree. But the cake
a little
itself,
on the
I
dry
would say.
side.
a little on the dry
Little on the
side,
dry
and you should
side.
really just go for their banana pudding
That's
if you
what
want
we've
to.
Yes.
said.
Yeah.
We,
But 100% true.
that restaurant was called Pastis.
Pastis.
Oh, yeah, Pastis.
Yes, of
right?
course.
That was like
Yes.
ultimate brunch place. from
And I
what
had
saw.
friends, even at NYU in college, who were from elsewhere in the country, and again, they were my friends, but I would make fun of them because they really wanted to go to Pastis, and I was like, why? We're 21, gross.
And you're like, and do you realize there's 12 bagel places on the way to Pastis?
exactly. I was like, but who wants to? I don't know. It just was kind of like, okay, like they wanted to go to Pastis and Babbo, and I was like, I'm not opposed to that. It just doesn't seem like it's in my wheelhouse.
That never was really in my sphere of like
Sure.
of what I would see, because it was money, and also I would always like know about places because I was like, oh, I heard about this on a blog. It's like a Brooklyn food place.
Sure.
And that was more in my reality a little bit. Yeah.
Which in its own way can be annoying and be like because I'm in the same boat where I'm like, if I tell you I read this, you'll hate me. But with that all being said, like it's
the
a
eater
separate
heat list right now
exactly.
says, yeah, exactly.
It's its own separate choice. But the Carrie Bradshaw effect that the show had to me is the stuff that I think people in New York don't like about L.A. That desire to like do the thing,
That's
and be
true.
with the people and go to Pastis. And it's like those things don't appeal to me here, and they don't appeal to me in LA. And so I don't know, but I can't really get on the same level, like cerebrally with people who are like, whether or not they say it, they're like, I'm going to be Carrie.
Yeah.
I'm the next Carrie Bradshaw.
Well, every episode we wrap it up with a Cosmo rating. Do we need to get to the Cosmo rating?
I think we need to do a Cosmo rating.
I think we need to do a Cosmo rating.
So we look at the episode and we rate it 1 to 5 Cosmos. You can use half and quarter Cosmos. And this is the first episode of season 2. So this will kick off our Cosmo ratings for season 2. Who wants to start this one?
I'll start this one. I think it's interesting coming back. I mean, like Eliot said, the pun thing kind of, I was like, oh my gosh, a lot of puns. And I think maybe the whole series is pun heavy. This one felt very pun heavy, but this one was interesting because not only just because of the discussion we had, I felt like overall this one felt a little more serious as an episode. Maybe it's because it was about breakups. The only I guess there's the Samantha penis stuff that was super goofy, and Charlotte's storyline was like she was dating this guy who kept adjusting his package, and he was also like such a white dude into jazz.
And dick.
He was kind of a dick. Yeah, and he was a dick to her when she was like, "I got you boxers, just support your balls."
Such a forgettable storyline.
It was a very forgettable storyline. But I think there were also a couple like really dramatic moments. Like there was a thing where Carrie saw Big and it was silent except for the sound of heartbeats for 15 seconds.
Yeah.
So a lot of heavy drama. To come back in, I was really excited for like top of season 2. I think though I'm gonna go with 3 Cosmos.
Wow.
I thought it was a little more serious, which I liked, but it didn't like knock my socks off. The pilot episode of the entire series, season 1 of the whole series, I thought was amazing. This one I felt like was a step down. So 3 Cosmos for me.
Interesting. I'm gonna go with 2 Cosmos, I think.
Wow.
I didn't laugh a ton, and that might be because we were, once you told us to listen for the puns, I just like it's literally all I could focus on. And then when she said "cup runneth over," we all made eye contact, and it was rough. And some of the storylines were super forgettable. Like Charlotte's was forgettable. Although Miranda's was a complete arc, like it didn't get me. And then Samantha's, like, last season I shared with like I'm over the small penis thing. It's played out and boring, and it just I can't believe they went back to it. So I'm going to
protest too much, honey. I would give it 4 Cosmos. I think it's like a pretty requisite episode. Funny or not. For me, I like that Miranda sort of broke through the fourth wall by being like, what the fuck are we doing on this show? Because it also represented for me the idea that always sort of haunts me when I watch the show, which is I don't think they would get along in a lot of contexts and situations, except for Carrie and Miranda. They get along, but I cannot see Charlotte and Samantha having a word to say to each other.
When Miranda got up to go to the bathroom in that scene, there was a thing where I was like, I don't know if these 4 women would really be friends.
I don't think so.
Anyway,
I don't think so. That's why. But because of the sort of the depth, the position that Miranda took on this episode, that sort of I like that a lot. So I'd give it 4 Cosmos.
4
baby.
Cosmos. Take us home, Kevin.
I would say that 3 Cosmos. I do think it's like coming back beginning of season 2. You can tell they had a break, and maybe they had enough time to sit around and be like, we've got a hit on our hands. What's working and what's not, and all of that was like, it was a little too serious at times. It wasn't that funny, but I do think the Miranda storyline was my favorite by far. And she's just a great actress and back with a great hairdo. Okay.
Great hairdo.
So yeah, I would say 3 Cosmos.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, hopefully on next episode we can catch some. I believe we have a blue turtleneck we still need to see and a gray turtleneck, and then
the Roy G. Biv
for the whole Roy G. Biv of Miranda.
I will poison your heads with one more thing that always kind of bugged me.
Perfect.
Yes.
That I didn't talk about on this show, but some of the production music is so bad. Like the music that they use, like the production music
Like
that
the
goes into the
interstitials
scenes
and stuff like that, or the things that are like under the scenes.
just under the scenes. And if you like the scene where they're at the Dolce and Gabbana party, the music that is playing is so bad.
And as he's talking about how good Miles Davis is, which is
they're playing
the worst
awful,
jazz.
They're playing I wrote down it sounds like a game show in space.
Oh, gosh.
The music is so bad. It's like beyond cheesy, bad, and it's just bizarre when you listen to the show. Like some of the stuff they play underneath is. But I also am like, was that okay for 1999? Like, was that what they thought was quote unquote like cool downtown music?
Yeah,
I don't know, but it's
amazing.
like bad.
It's set in an elevator.
I'd love for all you listeners out there, tweet at or Instagram at Bradshaw Boys the name of a game show that you would play in space. I'd love to see some responses. What would that game show look like?
Yeah. Speaking of Instagram and all those things, Elliot, where can we find you on the internet?
It's all at Eliot Glazer.
Cool.
And awesome. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
it.
Thanks so much.
This was really amazing.
See you next time, everyone. Bye.
The Bradshaw Boys stars Cory Cavin, Jon Sieber, and Kevin James Doyle. The show is produced by Jeremy L. Balin. For more information on the guys, check out their website at bradshawboys.com, on social media at The Bradshaw Boys. And if you see them in the street, tip your glass. Thanks for listening.